Hello everyone, this is the mind of Lilith, and thank you for joining me for part 1 of my analysis of Tupac Shakur's natal chart. Tupac had a very interesting and complicated life from the time he was born. He was betrayed by friends and family and associates in spite of how generous, beloved, naive, and loyal he was to these people. So for this analysis, I'm going to focus on his tragic relationships with his mother and women. And in part 2, I'm going to discuss the violence and danger that affected his life. So Tupac was born on June 16th, 1971 in the Bronx, New York. He has a sun, Mercury, and Venus in Gemini, Moon and Chiron in Aries opposite Pluto and Uranus, Mars in Aquarius, Jupiter and Scorpio square Mars, Saturn in Taurus, Uranus in Libra, Neptune in Sagittarius, and Pluto in Virgo. Tupac's Saturn was at an anaretic degree of Taurus, which is very significant when it comes to karma and life lessons. So based on the events of his life and death, I'm going to say that Tupac may have had a Capricorn ascendant, which would not be surprising because his mother, Afeni, was a Capricorn. Capricorn ascendants usually have a serious or gravely disposition, and they can be gangly or thin or skinny, unless there's an aspect to Jupiter, which can cause these natives to be emotional eaters. Capricorn ascendants do not shy away from responsibility. They're usually very practical, hard workers that love to take the lead in situations and to manage people. It is easy for most Capricorn ascendants to make sacrifices and exercise discipline to reach their goals unless there are some challenging aspects to contend with. People with the sun in Gemini are mercurial in nature. They're witty, intelligent, curious, charming, youthful, skillful, rebellious, and excellent communicators in written and spoken word. And Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So Tupac was very mercurial. Not only was he a prolific writer, he was an artist, he was a rapper, an actor, he was an activist. He lived life on the edge like many Plutonians do. And as a result, he experienced many tragedies and crises that have cemented his legacy to this day. There is just as much interest in Tupac's life now as it was when he was murdered at the age of 25 over 2 decades ago. Since then, he's become a canonized figure around the world, which is extraordinary for somebody who came from such humble beginnings. He was a child of a drug-addicted, bitter, broken, impoverished, and depressed mother, and a father who didn't raise him because he was married to another woman. Tupac had the Sun and Mercury square Pluto, and people with Sun square Pluto aspects have to learn tough lessons about personal power, helplessness, and transmuting tragedy and pain to evolve, right? Turning negative situations into productive life experiences. The Pluto and Virgo generation, which was from 1959 to 1972, transformed the cultural language of America and therefore its perspectives about race, class, and socioeconomic status, because Virgo rules the 6th house of work, health habits, and routines. The Pluto and Virgo generation is the hip-hop generation that gave birth to legends like Public Enemy, LL Cool J, Queen Latifah, Big Daddy Kane, DMX, Biggie Smalls, Black Thought, Rakim, Method Man, Kool Moe Dee, and others. I'm going to go into more depth about Pluto transits in the coming weeks. Because Pac's Sun and Pluto are ruled by Mercury, he used the written and spoken word to help facilitate the transformative experiences he was looking for. People who have Pluto aspects to their sun or other personal planets can be daredevils, and they are looking to break away from the limitations of their circumstances, or they will challenge the obstacles that other people put before them. Or they will challenge the obstacles that are put in place by systems, whether it's racism, whether it's classism, or whether it's religion. Plutonian people are the type to try to break away from tradition and establish new identities for themselves. Tupac had several names. His birth name was LaShawn, then he became Tupac, then he became Machiavelli. A lot of Plutonians, like Tupac and Malcolm X, changed their identities throughout their lives. Depending on the sign, the house, and the elements of Pluto, the challenges that they face can be overt or covert, or the way that they tackle their challenges can be overt or covert as well. But the ultimate goal of the Plutonian person is constant evolution through transformative experiences. And these experiences are rarely, if ever, comfortable. They're usually painful, and sometimes they're dangerous or deadly. And this is how Pac's fate played out. Tupac's compulsive desire to evolve spiritually compelled him to seek people and experiences that would force him to grow and change. However, with Pluto, the agents and the catalysts of change must be directed, focused, and intentional. Otherwise, the energy becomes self-destructive and even dangerous. The end of Pac's life was a maelstrom of drama, danger, betrayal, and violence because he did not direct his forceful, powerful energy productively, and his mercurial temperament pulled him in many directions, which diverted his focus away from what was most important and left him vulnerable for attack from many powerful enemies, which we can see with his Mars in Aquarius placement. If not controlled or managed carefully, the power of Pluto can become nuclear, destroying everything in its path, including its host. If you're someone with a Pluto conjunct, square, or opposing any of your personal planets or your angular houses, you have to learn how to control your thoughts and emotions and focus on one goal at a time. Otherwise, you'll become an octopus trying to manage all the distractions that will come your way because Plutonians are very magnetic. Okay, they can attract turmoil and drama to their lives faster and easier than people who don't have this aspect. So Tupac had the moon in Aries, conjunct Chiron in Aries. The moon represents our mother, our emotional needs, what makes us feel secure, what is familiar to us. The moon also shows how we react and respond to situations based on our childhood conditioning and psychological imprinting from the mother. Aspects to the moon and the moon sign indicate how we nurture and protect others and what we need from others to feel safe around them. Tupac's fiery moon in Aries showed a fierce, protective, independent spirit. He was a fervent warrior who was passionate about what he believed in, even to the point of violence. This was a trait inherited from both his parents, who were freedom activists in the Black Panther Party. In the years before his death, Tupac shot at 2 white off-duty police officers who were harassing a black driver. I would not be surprised if his reaction to that situation was based on the stories his mother would tell him about her experiences as a Black Panther. Tupac's mother was pregnant with him when she stood trial for the murder of a police officer, and she defended herself in court. Malcolm X also had a moon in Aries, and like Tupac Shakur, Malcolm X's mother was also very educated. She was independent, she was strong and fierce, and she instilled courage and righteousness in her son, just as Tupac tried to do to Tupac, okay? The painful and complicated relationship that Tupac had with his mother is further illustrated with the Chiron conjunction to his moon. Chiron represents our deepest wounds and trauma that we cannot heal due to circumstances beyond our control and because we cannot change the past. So we have to push through and use our pain to help other people through their situations. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Tupac's issues with women can be directly linked to his issues with his mother. Moon conjunct Chiron also indicates that the mother was in deep pain throughout her life. Afeni had a lot of struggles with men. She was betrayed by the men in her life, just as Tupac was betrayed by the people in his life. Afeni was betrayed by her father, and Tupac was not raised by his father. In fact, Afeni told Tupac that his father was dead. And she didn't do that to protect Tupac. She did that because she was angry with his father for the way things turned out in her life and their relationship. So Afeni betrayed Tupac just as she had been betrayed by the men in her life. And she didn't do it to hurt him per se, but she was in pain herself. And when people are in pain, they tend to hurt others, okay? Tupac inherited his karma from his parents, as all children do. This is why we have to be careful to conceive children and love and not lust, because lust is selfish, okay? And lust can bring about hatred and resentment when there are unexpected consequences for satisfying that lust, right? Right. So Tupac also had moon opposite Pluto and Uranus, or Pluto was opposing his moon. Pluto represents transformation and transmutation through crisis, trauma, betrayal, usually caused by painful secrets that the mother may have been carrying within her. Whenever I see someone with a tragic, traumatic, or chaotic life, There's usually a challenging aspect between Pluto and the moon. In Tupac's case, his mother struggled with drug addiction and homelessness after being betrayed by men and being disillusioned with the politics of the Black Panther Party, of which she was a member. As a single mother living in poverty, Afeni used drugs to escape her own pain and helplessness, which, traumatized Tupac. And the irony is that Tupac ultimately had to take care of the family who emotionally and mentally abused him as a child because of his physical appearance. This is another quality of the Pluto-Moon aspect, the child taking care of the parents. A lot of Black American children have this aspect in their natal charts for reasons I'll discuss at a later date. When there are tense aspects between the moon and Pluto, including the conjunction, the relationship between mother and child is complicated, warped, codependent, dysfunctional, and sometimes abusive. In many cases, the child is forced to grow up quickly because the mother does not have the capacity, the desire, or the wherewithal to differentiate her needs from her child needs. As a result, she cannot properly nurture and care for her child in spite of her best efforts. In some cases, with the Pluto moon aspect, the mother becomes very controlling, which emotionally cripples the child into codependency and insecurity to the point where the child does not feel free to live their lives as they choose. With this aspect, the child's identity is defined by the mother's trauma. So sometimes a child feels the need to rescue the mother from the burdens of motherhood by being the perfect child, by being the protector and the provider for their mother, because the roles are reversed. The mother is supposed to be the first provider, the first protector, and the first nurturer of the child. But when there are aspects to Pluto or even Saturn, this role is obstructed or obstructive to the child's individuality and development in some way. Like Tupac, Afeni also had Uranus aspecting her moon. Uranus aspecting the moon can cause mental and emotional instability, a broken home, or a mentally or emotionally unstable mother, which ultimately rattles the child's foundation. Afeni Shakur experienced a lot of childhood trauma and abuse that affected her self-esteem and her disposition towards men, including her son. Because of her own life experiences, her relationship with Tupac was not traditional, it wasn't conventional, it wasn't warm or close or nurturing, because Uranus is a planet that causes irritation when weighed by the responsibilities and obligations to others. Uranus wants to be unfettered and free to explore, to create, to experience. Afeni had Pluto in the 8th house from her son, which is why she dealt with so much trauma, tragedy, and betrayal in her life. Pac appears to have an 8th house son as well, which explains why these scorpionic themes were pervasive in his life. Tupac had an Aries moon, which again indicates that his mother was a free spirit. She was fierce, independent, strong, brave, resilient, but not very nurturing and warm in a traditional sense. This is the placement of the feminist, the nationalist, or a powerful matriarch who can be just as protective as she is destructive. Moon and Aries individuals, they like for their children to be independent. They don't like their children to be codependent on them. And sometimes they push independence on the child before the child is ready to be fully independent, which can cause resentment, okay? Moon and Aries individuals are also inclined to put their own needs first before they consider the needs of others, which isn't necessarily a bad or good thing. But when you have a baby or a young child, they need a lot of attention and care. And when you have Moon Aries people, this neediness and this attention and care that the child requires can cause some resentment or frustration in these natives, which is why a lot of them push their children to be independent quickly, because it's less of a burden for the Moon and Aries mother to take care of their child. It's not always the case, but it happens a lot, especially if the mother does not have a strong support system from the child's father or her family, okay? At the same time, a mother needs to take care of herself so that she can take care of her child. So as with everything, there has to be a balance. To further expound on Pluto and Uranus opposing the moon, Tupac was a child of 2 Black Panther Party members, which also shows a complicated relationship with one's mother country. That's the moon too. The Black Panther Party was a political activist group that fought to empower the Black community through education, politics, and grassroots community support. The U.S. government saw the Black Panther Party as a threat to the current political and socioeconomic caste system that have been created to keep blacks as a permanent underclass. So the U.S. government employed the FBI, the CIA, and local police departments to destroy the Black Panther Party by any means necessary, including murder, drug trafficking, extortion, and using informants to sabotage relationships. So Tupac's parents and many other black people of that generation, what we call the boomers today, were deliberately economically disenfranchised to punish them for their political beliefs. Many struggled with poverty and joblessness throughout their lives as a result, and we can see this with the Saturn and Taurus placement in Tupac's chart. If you are dating or in a relationship, please check to see if your partner has a challenging Moon Pluto, Moon Mars, Moon Saturn, or Moon Chiron aspect to their chart, because more than likely your relationship at some point will become unstable, miserable, emotionally detached, painful, abusive, and probably short-lived. A lot of natives with these aspects have a difficult relationship with their own feelings because they were not given permission to be vulnerable or to express pain or need. And these people can be either too needy or codependent, or they'll treat you like you are easily disposable. Only with age, time, and reflection can these emotional issues be resolved. Now let's talk about Venus. So Tupac had Venus in Gemini conjunct Saturn in Taurus. Venus is the planet of beauty, women, femininity, art, creativity, valuables, self-esteem, that which we own, music, love, romance, ritual, integration, and harmony. With the Sun and Venus in Gemini in the 6th house, Tupac was someone who enjoyed work immensely because it was an opportunity for him to express his creativity and artistic abilities. Venus and Gemini people are very charming, they're sociable, they're great communicators, and they have a natural curiosity about the opposite sex. This placement is not the most faithful or committed. Tupac's father even admitted that he was having, sex with multiple women at the time that Tupac was conceived. Okay. He was a playboy just like Tupac was. And Tupac's father ended up marrying another woman after Feeny got pregnant, which I'm sure did not make her too happy. So Tupac's Venus conjunct Saturn, which is the planet of responsibility, lessons, and restrictions. And from a young age, Tupac felt responsible for taking care of his family. And this is something that he took very seriously for the rest of his life. Jasmine Guy, who was a friend of the family, she was a friend of Tupac, and she helped Tupac Shakur write her biography. She said that she was appalled by how many people in Tupac's life were financially dependent on him. And at the time, he was barely even 22, 23 years old. Okay. And, sometimes Venus and Saturn people feel like they have to earn love or they have to buy people's love. And considering how harsh his family was towards him when he was growing up, I would not be surprised if Tupac felt that he had to take care of everyone for them to finally respect him. He even said in an interview once that he was treated differently once he started making money and got famous. So I believe this also got him caught up with Suge Knight as well. And Suge Knight was misappropriating Tupac's money too, Saturn and Venus. Suge Knight was supposed to be responsible for getting Tupac out of jail. And in exchange, he felt like Tupac owed his life to him, or Tupac felt like he owed his life and his resources to Suge Knight, who is a mentally disturbed individual based on what I saw in his natal chart. Tupac attracted weirdos and users throughout his life. And I'm going to partially attribute this to his Moon-Pluto opposition because I feel like his mother conditioned him, not even Pluto-Moon, I would say Uranus opposing the Moon too. His mother conditioned him or groomed him to accept people on the fringe or people from all walks of life. He was not a very judgmental person or a good judge of character. Tupac was very Aquarian in nature. And again, I mentioned that I believe that he has a Capricorn ascendant, but at a very late degree, which would put Mars in Aquarius in his first house. He had a very Aquarian personality, temperament, and nature. He was not someone who was haughty or conceited or materialistic per se. And this attracted weirdos and users to him, right? Tupac had a lot of respect and deference for his mother, who was an intelligent and brave woman, but she was also broken and resented her son, as evidenced by the Sun square Moon aspect between them. Afeni's sun in Capricorn squared Pac's moon in Aries, and Afeni's moon in Virgo squared his sun in Gemini. So Afeni also had Mars in Capricorn, which squared Tupac's moon, and this is an emotionally, verbally, and or physically abusive aspect. It was hard for Tupac and his mother to understand each other, but they innately understood why they did not understand each other. There was an understanding about why there was a disconnect, which allowed them to learn a lot from each other while he was alive. Tupac's Pluto in Virgo was conjunct with his mother's moon. And while he was very protective of her, he had a lot of hidden anger towards her and resentment towards her, which he tried to reconcile, in my opinion, by seeking her approval. It's not a coincidence that Afeni has a natal Uranus square moon aspect, and Tupac has a natal Uranus opposing moon aspect, which again indicates that his mother and his home were very unpredictable and unstable, which affected his finances too, because the moon and Venus both rules finances and women, right? So Tupac's relationship with women and his mother was the same relationship he had with his own money. Afeni was hard to please. Again, she was very independent. She was resilient. She was idealistic, unrealistic, intelligent. Yet, she was also very impressionable and easily deceived or misled by her own projections and fantasies, which made her susceptible to escapism through drugs. Interestingly enough, Tupac also sought to escape from his reality through music. Drugs and music are both significations of Neptune, which is the higher octave of Venus. Sometimes I wonder if Afeni rejected her son because his father chose another woman over her. And it's not because she didn't love Tupac, but she may have felt unlovable for the reasons that Tupac's father chose not to marry her, even though she was pregnant with his child. And Tupac looks just like his father. And if your father rejects me for whatever reason, and my son looks just like his father, then he'll reject me too. That could have been a subconscious fear that she had about her son, which is why she treated him the way she did. Okay? So yeah, sometimes with Venus conjunct Saturn or Venus square Saturn, people can be financially exploited or abused. And Suge Knight was robbing Tupac. Okay? Tupac was being, financially exploited by his family, his friends, his co-workers. Like, a lot was going on with him. He died with less than $250,000 in his pocket, yet he had made Death Row Records millions of dollars. Here we have this young, talented, beautiful man taking care of everybody, but nobody's looking out for him. Everyone is using him and treating him in a way that's against his own best interests. Saturn in Taurus is learning hard lessons about your resources, what you own, what you value. And the ruler of Taurus is Venus. So the sign that rules Saturn was conjuncting Venus, which is about money, self-esteem, and things that we value and resources. And so he had to learn very difficult lessons about buying love. Okay? Tupac had Saturn at 29 degrees and 51 minutes of Taurus, which is a very karmic placement. He was born to end a cycle of generational poverty and powerlessness, but he essentially had to sacrifice himself to do this. Saturn represents our lessons, responsibilities, and duties, and what we are sacrificing ourselves to accomplish. And these are things that we have to do to evolve spiritually. We don't have a choice. And Taurus is the sign of resources, money, ownership, stability, the value that we create, the things that we value. It is also ruled by Venus, which is in conjunction with Tupac's Saturn. So when we have Saturn conjunct Venus, this is someone who has to work hard for everything they want, for everything they have. Nobody gives them anything. And then they have to be prudent and responsible to maintain and amplify that which has been acquired through hard work and sacrifice. In many cases, Saturn and Taurus people have to use their resources to take care of others. The opposite sign of Taurus is Scorpio, which represents other people's resources, other people's energy, money, and sexual potency. Venus represents love, beauty, women, the arts, ritual, money. And in some ways, Tupac may have felt like he had to buy love, or there were heavy responsibilities and burdens put on him by the women in his life, starting with his mother. He was also betrayed by women and ended up in prison. Venus is aspected by both Saturn and Neptune, which can both represent imprisonment. Saturn deals with the deprivation of one's freedom to pay off karmic debts, and Neptune deals with the isolation and the loneliness of imprisonment that often lead to wisdom and spiritual enlightenment. At some point, Tupac went to prison because he was set up for a rape charge. And because Neptune is aspecting his Venus, I would not be surprised if there was some element of deception involved in that situation, which would explain why Tupac was so angry and pretty much went rogue afterwards. Tupac has Mars trine his sun square Jupiter. So like his parents, he was far from a coward. He enjoyed fighting, even when there wasn't a need to. He enjoyed the drama, okay? And this is, again, further evidenced by his Mars and Aquarius placement, which may be in his first house. Mars is the planet of war, conflict, violence, and competition, and it's in the sign of friendships, groups, associations, and organizations. Tupac became a member of the Blood Gang, just as his parents were members of the Black Panther Party. Ironically, some people say that the Bloods and the Crips were offshoots of the Black Panther Party, and they were created by the FBI to destroy the Black community. So Tupac's parents were in the Black Panther gang, and Tupac ended up joining the Bloods, and Pac has Saturn in Taurus, which squares his Mars in Aquarius. His involvement in tribalism and gang culture would make him learn some very difficult, deadly, and important lessons about controlling his temper, being careful with who you associate with, not allowing others to control your energy or your resources, and not repeating the same mistakes his parents did. And because Tupac's Saturn is conjunct his Venus, money and women were used to teach him some very tough lessons about self-esteem, about controlling your energy, controlling your resources, controlling the people you have in your circle, being careful with who you associate with, and so on, okay? As intelligent as Tupac and his mother both were, they both lacked discernment about who they should associate with. And they both paid a heavy price for that. Now let's get into Neptune. When we deal with themes of betrayal and deception, we have to look at Neptune and even Saturn to an extent, because sometimes Saturn makes us pay for things we did not buy and we don't benefit from. I'm going to say it again. Sometimes the karma of Saturn makes us pay for things that we did not pay for and we don't benefit from. Tupac had Neptune in Sagittarius opposing Venus and Saturn. When Saturn opposes, conjuncts, or squares Neptune, at some point in the person's life, all of their hopes, dreams, fantasies, and illusions will be destroyed by the hard reality that human beings are flawed. They're selfish, they're manipulative, they're self-serving, they're deceptive, they're violent, they're abusive, they're dysfunctional, right? When Saturn gets involved, your faith is tested and in many cases is destroyed. And this can make somebody bitter. This can make someone angry. This can make someone self-destructive. Tupac's mother dealt with the same disillusionment about the men in her life in the Black Panther Party. She dealt with extreme poverty, homelessness, and self-esteem issues throughout her life that caused her to emotionally and mentally abuse herself and her son. People with Neptune opposing Venus tend to have addictive personalities that are fueled by their idealism, wishful thinking, and fantasies that have no basis in reality or their experiences. They are easily deceived by women or manipulated into giving everything they have to appease others. With the Saturn conjunction, even after giving their all to somebody, okay, sacrificing their peace, their happiness, their finances, their resources for somebody, even after doing all of that, these natives who have Neptune square, conjunct, or opposing Saturn have to face the cold, hard reality that they were just a tool. They were an object. They were utility, something to be used. Saturn conjunct Venus blocks unconditional love. And this is something Pac was desperate for because of his relationship with his mother. Venus opposite Neptune makes someone believe that love should be free, unfettered, and unconditional. This is the person that will give you the shirt off their back. However, the Saturn conjunction makes this person pay a heavy price, and they learn excruciating lessons about being delusional, because the person or the people or the job who is okay with taking everything from you is not someone or something you should love unconditionally. You should not love someone unconditionally who has no issue with taking everything that you have. It is dangerous to love someone unconditionally if this person does not care about you enough to make sure you have what you need for yourself. If they have no problem taking everything from you to sustain themselves, that is very dangerous. And people with tense aspects to Saturn and Neptune usually have to learn this lesson the hard way, okay? As a side note, after I wrote my analysis, I found out that Tupac had a song called Unconditional Love. Tupac had unconditional love for the common man and was willing to put his life in danger to protect people he didn't even know or people who damn sure didn't even deserve it. Tupac's Neptune-Venus opposition made him too trusting of women and too liberal with his money, and these people would betray him, as Saturn is in the 12th house from his sun. Saturn conjunct Venus can cause crushing poverty, but Tupac was able to use his Neptunian gifts to escape the curse and create a legacy and generational wealth for his family. Tupac was a humanitarian, which again is indicated by the Mars square Saturn in his chart. Mars is in the sign of the humanity, people, society, friendships, and groups. And with the Saturn square, he paid a heavy price and he was sacrificed because of his desire to help humanity, because of his belief systems, because of his ability to galvanize and inspire large groups of people, which made him very powerful. But at the same time, when you have power and you have money and you have talent and you have beauty, right? And you have courage and you have a conscience and you have intellect and you have empathy for human beings, you become a threat to the government, especially if your parents were political activists. Okay. So Tupac had many powerful enemies because he was willing to sacrifice himself for the common man. And not only that, he was willing to do so in a way that was so inspiring, so motivational, so attractive, so compelling. He was extremely powerful, like Michael Jackson. And as a result, he had to be killed. I'm going to get into why I think he was killed by the government in part 2. Let me get back to Neptune. So Pac had a fiery Neptune and moon, which gave him a dreamy, beautiful, almost feminine appearance. Not effeminate, but feminine. In spite of his cursing and his bad temper and his violent tendencies, he was seen as a beautiful alpha man who had thousands of women willing to spend the night with him. He had fashion labels who wanted him to model their clothes. He had movie directors who wanted him in their films. Regardless of the earrings and the nose ring he had, he exuded this virile, sexual masculinity, which can be credited to his Mars trine Sun aspect and Pluto square Sun aspect. And again, Mars may be conjunct his ascendant, which makes someone exude sexual energy regardless of how they look. Pluto square Sun can also make someone seem very magnetic and sexually appealing without even trying, because they exude power, mystery, fearlessness, and primal passion. To close out part 1, Tupac's life was very complicated because none of his relationships were the way they were supposed to be. There was always something hidden or secretive or manipulative about his relationships with women, his mother, his friends, the people he worked with, etc. He had lots of enemies, not because he was a bad guy per se, but because he had all the ingredients of a powerful leader. He had charm, talent, beauty, charisma, intellect, empathy, compassion. He had all of the qualities that a person would need to be considered a good, powerful, effective leader in our society. And those are qualities that both his parents gave him. Yes, I gave Afeni a hard time saying she was abusive to Tupac, but most of the members of the Black Panther Party loved their people and their community so much that they were willing to put themselves in danger, and they were willing to put their lives on the line for the sake of the greater good. A lot of Black Panther Party members were assassinated by the government, and it wasn't because they were doing anything wrong. It was because they were doing the right thing to liberate their people. But when you have a slavery-based, a deceptive socioeconomic system, anybody who disrupts the status quo gets assassinated, white, black, or otherwise. And this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump has a target on his back, because he's a nationalist. And a nationalist goes against the agenda of a globalist system. But I'll get into that later. So essentially, in my opinion, Tupac became canonized after his death because he was a martyr for his people. He sacrificed his life for his beliefs. If he had allowed himself to be controlled by the media, by the industry, he would not have been killed. He would have been propped up like Jay-Z. He would have been propped up like Dr. Dre. He would have been propped up like Snoop Dogg, because they're useful puppets for the machine. Tupac wasn't like that. He was woke. Okay? He was intelligent. He was passionate. He was brave. He knew what was going on. He knew about the politics of business and the business of politics. And again, if he had allowed himself to be controlled by the same industry and the same organizations and the same people and the same elites that killed Michael Jackson, then he would be alive today and probably a billionaire like Diddy, like Jay-Z, like the rest of the tools and the puppets that the elites are using to propagate dysfunction and destruction in our communities. Yes, Tupac had songs that were very violent, and he was the reason why the East Coast, West Coast drama got blown out of proportion. But that only happened because there was an assassination attempt on his life by the very entities and the very organizations who sought to control him from day one, right? But again, that's for part 2. All right, guys, I look forward to reading your feedback. If you want to order a personal astrology or tarot reading or personal coaching session, you can go to my website, fill out the order entry form, and submit payment via CashApp or credit card. Okay? All right, guys, look forward to reading your feedback. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will speak to you soon.